Gus Fenn had worked the night porter's stand at the Grand Alderton for 11 years, long enough to know the difference between a man who belonged and a man who was about to be told he didn't. He saw Ray Sutter coming through the revolving door on a Tuesday evening in October. Work boots, canvas jacket, a paper envelope of invoices under his arm, and he already knew what was coming before Martin Hale opened his mouth. Hale was the front manager. Pressed shirt, a habit of standing slightly higher than he needed to, a talent for volume that looked like policy. Sir. The word had an edge to it. Deliveries and maintenance used the side entrance. He said it loud enough that the couple checking in at the desk turned around. Loud enough that it landed where Hale intended it to land. In the open, in front of people, with Ray's work clothes doing the explaining. Ray stopped. He looked at Hale with the calm, unhurried look of a man who has been looked at that way before and has decided, years ago, what it means and what it doesn't. I have invoices for the renovation account, Ray said. Quiet, even, side entrance. Hale gestured toward the corridor. Not unkindly, exactly. Worse than unkindly, dismissively, the way you redirect foot traffic, the way you move something that doesn't belong. Ray went. He didn't argue. He didn't look at the couple at the desk. He tucked the envelope back under his arm and turned toward the corridor. And Gus watched the lobby swallow him up and thought, not for the first time, that Martin Hale had a talent for making a man feel the floor beneath him. Gus hadn't known Ray Sutter's name then. He would learn it later. What he knew that night was the canvas jacket, and the paper voices, and the way the man had held himself when he was redirected, straight, contained, like something had been absorbed without being accepted. He thought about it on his break. He thought about what it must cost to carry that kind of composure. He had a daughter, Gus had noticed, a drawing tacked above the time clock in the service corridor, a crayon girl in a field, Maya written in the corner in careful block letters. A kid who believed her father came home from somewhere worth going. He thought about the lobby, too, while he was thinking. The lobby that Hale had gestured Ray away from, the ironwork on the staircase banister, the lantern brackets along the mezzanine, the restored transom above the front entrance, its scrollwork so precise it looked original, because it was, because someone had made it original again. The Grand Alderton's architect had gone on record calling it the finest interior, metalwork in the city. The trade press had photographed it. The hotel group had used it in 4 brochures. Gus had never thought to ask who made it. The rain came after midnight. Gus was at the end of his shift, standing under the entrance canopy with his collar up, waiting on his bus, when he saw the woman on the far side of the street. A dark sedan, hazards blinking, pulled half onto the curb in front of the wine merchant. She was on her phone, or trying to be, tapping at a screen that wouldn't cooperate. And when the rain picked up, she put it in her pocket and stood, there with her shoulders drawn in, looking at the flat rear tire the way people look at something that has already made up its mind. Gus saw the man before he recognized him. Canvas jacket, coming around the corner from the service exit, head down against the rain, heading for wherever he'd parked. Ray Sutter stopped. He stood there for a moment, rain coming down on him, looking at the car, looking at the woman on the far curb. Then he crossed the street, watched him say something to her, watched her glance at the tire, and then back at him with the wariness that comes from being a woman alone, on a wet street at midnight, and watched the wariness ease when Ray crouched down and simply looked at the tire the way a man looks at a thing he is going to fix. He didn't ask her name. She didn't offer it. He found the spare in the trunk, found the jack, and worked in the rain without theater. The woman held flashlight for him when he asked for it, and they spoke a little. Gus could see the shape of it from across the street, unhurried. And when it was done, Ray stowed the flat and closed the trunk and said something that made her reach for her purse. He shook his head. She said something else. He shook his head again, and then he said something short and final and walked away down the street into the dark, his jacket soaked through, never once asking her who she was. Gus's bus came and he almost missed it, standing there watching the empty street. He thought about it for 30 days. The woman was Diane Callow. Gus learned that later, too. She owned the hotel group, all 4 properties, the Grand Alderton and its 3 sisters. And she had been standing in the rain outside her own flagship hotel because she'd sent her driver home early and her phone had died on the walk from the parking structure. And not one of the cabs she'd flagged had stopped. She had a good memory for faces. She had an even better memory for work. When she walked into the Grand Alderton the following morning, and stood in the lobby and looked at the ironwork. The way she hadn't looked at it in 2 years. She asked her assistant to pull the original restoration contract. The assistant pulled the ledger. The credit line read, contracted fabrication, Sutter Ironworks, flat rate, term, 18 months. There was no further credit, no follow-on work, no name in any of the brochures. She asked her assistant to find the address. Gus heard about it from the housekeeper, who heard about it from the overnight desk, which was how news traveled at the Grand Alderton. What he knew was this. On a Thursday morning, 30 days after Ray Sutter had been redirected to the side entrance, Diane Callow drove herself to a garage on a side street 12 minutes from the hotel and walked in without an appointment. She recognized the work on the wall before she recognized the man. Photographs of ironwork, bracket, transom, railing, and beside them, the hotel group's own brochure, 4-color, the Grand Alderton lobby spread across the cover. His work, documented in their marketing, his name in a ledger no one had opened in 2 years. Ray Sutter came out from behind a workbench with grease on his hands and looked at her, and she watched his face move through the recognition. "I owe you a spare tire," she said. He said he didn't think so. She said she thought otherwise. And she set the commission folder on the workbench and told him what was in it. Lead fabrication and restoration contract for all 4 properties in the group, a 3-year term. His name on every piece of work. Fair rate, not flat. He looked at the folder for a long moment, then he picked it up. She asked him, while he was reading, why he hadn't told her who he was, that night in the rain. He said there hadn't been anything to tell. She needed a tire changed. He knew how to change one. She looked at him across the workbench with the brochure between them and said quietly that she wished more people thought that way. From the back of the garage came the sound of a door, and then a small girl appeared in the interior. Doorway with a school bag and a drawing, the kind carried with both hands because it matters. Maya, 9 years old, dark eyes, a crayon field and a blue sky and a figure that was clearly her father, taller than everything else on the page. She stopped when she saw the visitor and looked at her father with a question on her face. Ray said, "Come on in, Bug, this is a friend." Gus heard the rest of it from the housekeeper, who heard it from the overnight desk. Martin Hale was reassigned to the group's property in Denton the following week. Not fired, no drama, no announcement. It was done the way the right things are sometimes done. Quietly, with consequences that land exactly where they belong. Maya Sutter's spot in the after-school arts program, the one Ray had been about to pull her from, was secured for the year. The hotel group handled it, no fanfare. A thing done because it was owed, because decency, when it is real, tends to find its own level. Gus thought about the revolving door, the paper envelope of invoices, the way a man absorbs something without accepting it and keeps walking. He thought about the rain, and the flat tire, and the way Ray Sutter had shaken his head when she reached for her purse. That short, final gesture of a man who genuinely did not believe help required a transaction. He had spent 11 years at that porter's stand, watching people decide what other people were worth from 20 feet away. He had seen the lobby's ironwork photographed and praised printed in 4 brochures. He had never once known who made it. He knew now, and he thought, standing at his stand watching the revolving door turn, that the Grand Alderton had never looked better than it did this morning, and that the man who built it had come in through the front entrance today without anyone stopping him.